I'm going to use several different colors, browns, greens, black, to develop a rich, interesting, textured, complex tree line that will be enjoyable to look at. When I blend these trees, I'm going to be very cautious that I am able to keep the blackness and the darkness of the tree line contained. I'm going to be careful and slow just around the top and bottom edges. The bottom, in fact, isn't even as important because I'm going to color over that and it's going to be fairly dark in that area. I still want to keep it cautious and not get it too messy, but I want to be especially careful of the top layer. Since I've already more or less finished the sky, I don't want to have to go back and fix it. As I start to look at how I'm going to continue coloring the water, one thing I want to keep in mind is getting a rough outline of where the sun might be reflecting off the water. So, since I know that things appear smaller as they get further from us, it makes sense that they're going to look bigger as they get closer to us. So the path that the sun is going to reflect off is going to be wider lower on the page. So I'm going to make kind of a trapezoid shaped angled ray of the sun heading toward the sun. And I'm going to use that just similar to the way that I made the peaks of waves with the blue before. I'm going to use a curving line in between several strokes crossing between each of the two borders of this trapezoid, the width of the sun at its narrowest base, and I'm going to make a bunch of what will eventually be the crests of waves or bits of current that are reflecting light off of them. Again, keeping this trapezoidal shape extending around and over part of the kayaker. Then I'm going to go into the top of the water, and I'm going to start with a scumbling motion with one other blue. I'm going to use at least 3 or 4 different blues, maybe some whites in here as well, to get a really rich, interesting, well-developed set of blues that make up the water and make it look really good. So I'm going to be scumbling this layer on after I already had the texture of the other layer, and we're going to see that some of it will show through and some of the scumbling will show through, and it will start to look interesting, natural way. Once I've scumbled most of the water surface, I'm going to go back in and emphasize the water texture in that sunbeam area. After that, I'm going to start to put a light pressure layer and then a bit heavier pressure layer on top of my kayak. I wanted to wait a while to let most of the texture around it develop without having too many disturbed areas. It's a lot harder to get the right texture and effect that we want in those areas, for instance, where the sunbeams are coming down, because we can't keep it consistent with the rest of the water. The more that we can keep things consistent, the easier it is to make them work out well. So I like to keep this area relatively free and clear for as long as I can. But now it's time for me to color this guy in. So I know the top of the kayak is a sort of ellipse shape with points on each end. It has a side that comes down. Most of it sits in the water. And I know roughly the shape of the body. Once I feel satisfied with the coloring on my character and kayak, I'm going to start to transition into the next layer of colors on the grass. When I use the grass, I'm going to use a nice yellow ochre, a brown of a sort of tannish brown, a green, and a very nice dark brown as well. I use at least 4 different colors. I'm going to be going over it in a few different layers. Now, what I'm going to be doing, starting as low as possible. This seems counterintuitive, but remember, things that start low on the page seem close to us. I want to start and set the highest of any of the grasses are going to be and have the greatest amount of detail and precision and time and focus and visibility on the things that are close to us that I'm not going to cover up with other layers after. So I'm going to use these colors first, using just a corner of each one, as we remember from our grass practice or fur texture practice. You're using the corner, starting low and making individual marks for each stroke, making a whole bunch of them, leaving space between them, just like you see me doing here. Once again, I'm making the grass that starts lowest the longest. I'm going to end up with about 3 different sections of grass, and there's going to be the closest bit, the medium bit, and the furthest bit. I may have that on both sides, and you're going to see me making those chunks or blocks of grass each time. It can be a little bit hard to tell the difference, but these are all still that front area of grass. You'll notice that most of these are stopping either when they get to the water line or when they all get to a certain height. They all are about the same height. It's about, nearly half of the distance that we still need to cover. And I'm using all of the same sorts of height for all of my different colors. I'm layering in that green, that old golden brown, that tan, that dark brown, just layering lots of these colors in over one another with the edges of the pastels. Once I have that first section well fleshed out, I'm going to make another section, and each of the strokes, the marks that make the different blades of grass in this section are going to be a little bit shorter. You'll notice that they are somewhere around 2/3 of the height of the original set. And I'm going to keep that pattern going, and I'll have, as you see, space for one more layer on top of this. So I'm going to color this layer with all those different colors. And you'll notice that each layer starts to go a lot quicker. You don't need to put as much detail. You can use a somewhat wider stroke with each layer. And ultimately, we're going to do some more blending with these layers so they all sort of mix together and blend together anyway. That helps to make this part go a little bit quicker, just like you're seeing here. Somewhere around 2/3 of the height of the original set. And I'm going to keep that pattern going, and I'll have, as you see, space for one more layer on top of this. So I'm going to color this layer with all those different colors. And you'll notice that each layer starts to go a lot quicker. You don't need to put as much detail. You can use a somewhat wider stroke with each layer. And ultimately, we're going to do some more blending with these layers so they all sort of mix together and blend together anyway. That helps to make this part go a little bit quicker, just like you're seeing here. When I move up to the final layer, you can see that I'm using even wider, shorter strokes with less space in between them. And these are also still a fairly light pressure, lighter than in the earlier layers of the grass. There are lots and lots of ways to make a background look good. This is certainly not the only way, but it's an effective technique to make the scene appear to be fading away from us and to still keep the grassy areas interesting and enjoyable to look at.